Hello, everyone. So I will wait a couple minutes for people to join our live event. So this is actually the first one of a long week of live interviews. It's going to be an opportunity to talk more about communicating sustainability in different fields. Will have different aspects. Today we have Riccardo Parigi. So Riccardo Parigi, he's a trainer, environmental communication consultant. He's Must SRL owner, so it's an Italian communication agency. He's a trainer. You're, again, an expert in environmental communication, and mostly, and we're going to talk about that, you sort of developed EN Roads, so climate change simulator as well, and you are their ambassador. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Good evening, Asia. Thank you for this invitation, and good evening to all the followers. I'm very happy to introduce this long week. And it's amazing and interesting, the subject and the opportunity to talk about environment. Actually, I'm an environmental communicator since 1991, when I've started with my first client in this issue, that was a refinery. So I know it could be tricky, but I've started, and I'm at the moment communicator specialist for industries and strategies on environmental communication. What does it mean? It means that I try to help industries to develop their skills in communication, and mainly in environmental communication. So to express their skills in research and in open-minded approach to the environment, because today it's impossible to have a business without part of the investment, not only economical, but also in, in the psychological approach in environment, because the environment, fortunately, it's a focus point today for the developing and developing of business and consumers likes to buy goods with a good approach to the environment. So we know that mainly in Europe, not only, people research say to us that people like to spend even more, but if the product is environmental friendly. So to be in the everyday business, you have to approach environment as in the real complexity of the matter.
So you have many years of experience, and I find that's interesting because you come to a sort of a point in your career which is not simple. I mean, I'm sure you've sort of watched the wave of environmentalism actually growing. I mean, you're author of a very important book in Italy about environmental communication. So maybe you can tell us about the struggles and the challenges, both from the people as well as your own clients.
Well, when I started, I was something like a panda. So someone is someone to defend because he is strange. There is only me. There was only me in Italy talking about environment in an industrial approach. And as you mentioned, I'm very grateful to Stefano Martello and Sergio Fazzoler, the two men who asked me to write one of the 30 parts of this book. That is the Libro Bianco sulla comunicazione ambientale, so the white book on the environmental communication. And as I quote the the press release. And the volume is published by Pacini Editore for the New Fabric series, and it collects 13 different testimonies in a many professional sectors. So the first one, attention is focused, as you told before, the struggle and the opportunity of the environment. Today, we are facing the environment issue in several and maybe in an innovative approach to communicate the environmental issue, because some years ago, the only one who communicate the environment were the ambientalists. So people believing that the future of the world of Gaia, the name of the planet, according to Lovelock, that is something that is living, not only water and rocks, but is a person, a living people. So Earth is really important. At the moment, we are facing several opportunities, and in the meantime, several struggles, because environment, it's really has many contradictory and difficult to translate, because there are several aspects of the ambient, of the environment, and they clash with the complexity of the everyday life, as Stefano and Sergio says. And why a white book? Why we wrote a white book? Because the white book means that every one of us is an author in progress. So every one of us has the opportunity. So every one of us can and must write a page or a chapter and made a piece of history. So environment is a big issue, really a big issue. So big so we can afford is by ourselves. We need to be connected. Only with a strong connection between us, we can face the opportunity to save the planet and to save ourselves.
So in your particular chapter, you do go into detail about those steps. So are useful. So you speak about inclusion, education, and I think it was a third one. And I actually wrote them down. It has to be inclusive, it has to make people curious, and also it has to make people passionate. I thought by informing as well. So you say that education is very important. I'll just make a little note for the people watching. If you do have questions for Riccardo, you can write them in the comment section. So yes, Riccardo, could you tell us a little more about why you think particularly also education is very important? And if you can mention Ian Rhodes, because that's something you used in schools as well. Yeah.
Well, when I was a student, I was, and I'm still today, really curious. I want to know, and I always say why, and why, and why. And I think that is the really power for every one of us to continue to say and asking why, and why, and why. Because curiosity means that you have an aim to reach a result, to reach a goal. But I discovered that sometimes goals are not so clear. We are speaking about goals in a fog way. You haven't a real approach, a real main road to reach the goal. I found an interesting approach to this question and so the importance of education by an author that I know you like, that is Geoffrey Sachs, and he is quoting President Kennedy, and President Kennedy says that if you want to reach a goal, and it was in a peace speech in June 1963, and Kennedy was at the end of the Cuba crisis missile, so he needed to reach the peace between the USA and the USSR. And he says that you need to fix a goal in a way that is clear, achievable, manageable, and people have to fix and have clear the goal and have the motivation to reach the goal. There is nothing that is impossible for us, but everything could be boring. We need motivation, because motivation is, in my opinion, the real power. If you have a motivation, you can do whatever you want.
And you do make an example in the book as well. You make an example of a company speaking to its workers. It's good that companies are sustainable and they're speaking to their workers, but if their workers are not interested in sustainability of the company, then there's no sense in having that conversation, right?
Yeah, because if I introduce something like environment is something, I mean, not intangible. It's an idea. It's not something that you can touch, you can measure at the moment using a technical skill. You need not technical skill to approach environment and other issues. Freedom is the same. Every one of us has his own idea on freedom. If we ask to our followers, each one of them has a different approach to the word freedom. So you need non-technical skills, you need motivation, and you need involvement. So training is not one-way connection with your trainee. I did a lot of training in industries about safety, about environment, but my point is to listen to the people. And in a classroom, when adults maybe close to retire and say, I don't care. If you approach the point in a different point, saying, okay, maybe you say, I don't care because you are close to retire, but you are a grandfather. So what about your grandchildren? What about your son, your daughter? Environment is the future. So you have a lot of experience. You can translate this experience in opportunities to educate and, in the meantime, to listen to your grandchildren and their approach to the environment. So it works because people start to react by their own and introducing suggestion. When we are speaking about stakeholder engagement, we are not speaking about coming top down, but we involve people that already an educator or a trainer or a sportsman involving young people in biking, swimming, and so on. And they start to invite the children or the family. Open day, enter the factory, ask whatever you want, look whatever you want, in safety, of course. And it means a new way to discover what does it mean to be an industry today. In this way, we connect education, training, and dialogue with the environment. With the stakeholders.
So what the impression that I had as a feedback to the book, especially, was that the reason why it exists, even speaking to Sergio and Stefano, was that a lot of action is missing sometimes because communication is failing. Not that it's not good, but it's just that bridge happens and then it sort of stills. So I have a good day with my family at the factory, the industry. I have my grandfather who could be interested in my well-being. But there's always a general feeling that action is not really happening. Maybe from the company, yes, but not other stakeholders. So what can you tell us about that?
Okay, we have to start from the beginning. Communication is not so easy. We always believe that we are able to speak, so we are able to communicate. It's not the same thing. Communication is not speaking, but is listening. The first approach is this one. It is not only a point by the industries, as you told. In this book, there are 13 different approaches: environment and theater, environment and museum, environment and local government, and so on. So, different approaches. The mainstream is environment, but there are other points really important. We are in Italy. Italy is different from other European countries in the in people trust versus political representative and versus the corporate control units, as in Italy, the environmental corporate by the state to control the industries. When they say it's okay, people say, I don't trust. Or we need a new road, we don't trust. We don't trust. But it's are people or is the complexity of the politics, industry, people, and so on, education? Why we don't trust? The problem is a lack of communication, of course, and a lack of trust. We have to rebuild trust, and we rebuild trust only with a good example. It's so simple and so difficult. You need time. You need to be transparent in the real meaning of the word transparent. So admitting past difficulties, admitting that you can manage better in the past, and you are respecting the best available technologies, and so on. And it needs time. It needs time. It's not a silver bullet. You haven't a silver bullet. You need time to communicate in the right way.
So I think this brings to a question about the other stakeholders, so the environmentalist. I think it was in one episode we spoke with an expert. He's a eco-media expert, former professor of mine as well, and he mentions that the term environmentalist is maybe either misused or you shouldn't be using it, because if we care about our planet, we're caring practically about our home, so everybody should do it. But those who define themselves environmentalist, how do you think their communication has changed, or their approach also has helped to act? Because we know that talking more about it can help find better solutions. So of course their work has been, and I say they just because not to include myself, but sort of the idea that we're doing awareness work as a baseline, and that's good. It's a start. However, there have been concerns about that. What can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, I approached the environment issue when I was very young, as I say in the book, following the example of my uncle. And he involved me in collecting paper and selling paper for WWF. So I believe in the environmental approach, and we have to split the approach, that you have an environmental approach and environmentalist. So sometimes the approach is not open-minded, a blindfold approach from the industry for politics and for environment. But is not a balanced rapport, because industry are big. Industry has money. Behind the industry, there are trade unions, stock to change. So a lot of power, a lot of money. On the other hand, you have a few people, they believe in what they are doing. They have no money, they have no power. And industries, in the past, I hope, never pay attention to those people. Say, oh, bullshit. It's terrible, because today we have people that is angry, and it's okay. They are right. No one listened me in the past, and now we are in a big problem. So, as the American says, I try to walk with the other one's shoes for a week before to judge. And sometimes facing the environmental approach is helpful for not only industries, but for politics, for the technician, the scientist. Scientists, as I say in my book, in my part of the book, approach things by numbers, or using measure as a Bible. So speaking about nanograms, picograms, and people don't know what that means. And sometimes numbers are a division bell. It's not a connection. It's a wall. It's not a bridge. We used to speak about environment using simple word, trustable but simple. Using metaphor, you can do whatever you want, because a metaphor is a method in which there is no guilty, not a judge, but is a way to find a common sense to solve the problem.
And you do make that example in the book where you explain that you sort of re-represented a numerical number into something visual, like a bottle of water, and identify that. So if you saw that like in 1,000 bottles, 10,000, then sort of make your mind it. And I think it was sort of you were telling someone about the decreasing of a certain pollutant. Yes. So you were comparing the measurement with
decrease of the number. And another point is we speak usually, I mean, as a politician, but even as an environmentalist, we are using a kind of language that is not the common language. Is a language of a typical way of life. So I'm an environmentalist, and I'm speaking about the problem, the quantity of dead, and so on. scaring people sometimes. In my opinion, environmentalists, even if they are speaking something that is scary, they must be sometimes more positive, with a little bit of, I don't know, but positivity in their speaking, hoping that the future is possible to change in a better way. And as you mentioned before, I use an useful tool that is En-ROADS. En-ROADS means Environmental Rapid Overview and Decision Support. Is a tool that is simply, okay, it's simply to understand, complex to use, but simply to understand. And it was developed by Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT Sloan, the spin-off, and Ventana, a big data company. And they developed, based on the most rigorous studies about environment and simulation starting from 2000 to 2100, and how we can affect in a better way the climate change. That means sea level rise. It means PM10 or 2.5, the temperature of the planet, and a lot of other indicators. In this way, people playing, and I run En-ROADS starting from the from children. Yeah, they are children.
Middle school, I would imagine. Yeah,
ago,
middle school.
Ago,
okay, yeah.
So to the university and into the industries with the politics. So a different professional, so architects, engineer, it's a pro bono action. So I'm an ambassador, maybe the first one in Italy. I became an ambassador in the beginning of 2020. And in the beginning of 2020, we were 100 all over the world. So very few people. At the moment, we are 3,500 and constantly increasing.
Yeah.
But it's powerful because you have several slider. You change the slider. Okay, the ambassador is a supervisor, and helps you to reflect that every movement you made, even if you believe is the better for the environment, involve social problems, involves economics problems. So we like to reduce the pollution, of course, but it's only an example. But if you like to reduce pollution, maybe you believe that, well, I tax the coal production, so coal is not so cheap to buy, it became expensive, and people use other kind of energy, maybe clean energy. But clean energy cost a lot, and clean energy is not so close to poor people. Poor people use whatever they found to burn, to eat. So the first objective of the Agenda 2030 is reduce poverty. If we not reduce poverty, we can't absolutely face the environmental problems. No.
I think you make a really good point about this, because privilege is something we've mentioned quite frequently in our episodes and among each other, because it is quite crucial. If you can make the change, then it's because you can afford as well. whether you're a company who's polluting and you can reduce it, or you're a citizen who can make other choices. But what I really liked about En-ROADS, when I read a previous interview that you gave, was that it added in so many elements about the environment. It's not only an environmental point of view, but it's a political and social. And I believe that you described that you divided the students into different groups and have them from their own point of view. Can you tell us the results from that?
It's really interesting, really interesting, because in my opinion, I thought that they are all environmentalists. So the problem is the industry. If we close all the industry, the problem is solved. Instead, they approach, because they have to act as a representative of oil and gas, representative of new technologies, representative of land and farmers, and so on, developing countries or Europe and USA. They approach the problem in a more complex point. And they try to reflect about the whole picture without any doubt. So they don't say, as the adults are used to say, oh, we can't face the problem. They say, okay, in this way it doesn't work. Okay, try in the other one. Or if we do this, it's possible that. So the connection is incredibly more interesting in the young people. And I did the question to recently to the group of students in a university, and I suppose that they say the problem is about pollution made by industries. Okay, in the late years, they no. I was very surprised that 8 different groups, 5 of them are speaking about fast fashion. And fast fashion, I discovered, the second one industry more pollutant in the world. And
yes,
the other 3 groups are speaking about livestock.
Which is the #1 pollutant in the world, right?
Yeah. We are speaking what we are wearing, what we are eating. Very interesting. It's a confirm that if you don't think with I'm right, you're wrong, and you approach in an open mind, young people give you very interesting new point to discuss and to develop.
And so I think you mentioned something that we could say is about mindset. Having a particular mindset can influence your decision. So is there, in your opinion, a way in which we can communicate issues by allowing people to have a more open mindset, even when it goes against, we can say indirectly, to their own benefit?
Well, I really like this new way to communicate, that is social media, Wikipedia. This way we can communicate with all of the people in the world using our own computer in our own home. The problem is the use of the instruments. So if you use social network and so on as how can I say, an instrument to replicate or multiplicate scaring, fake news, and so on, you can't reach the goal. If you use this as an instrument to developing different approaches, but in a fair way, introducing the rational part, scientist, researcher, and the emotional too. I feel scared because I don't know. I feel that we can change the mindset. We have to remember that we are human. We have no exoskeleton. We have no fighting arms. We fight and we win in the late past only together, fighting against the tiger, fighting against great animals, only together using our brain. It's the same today. We need to connect. Sorry.
No, please finish. Go ahead.
So we need to connect, and connection is made by communication. Communication means trust to someone. I mentioned an episode that that make me a good reflection. I was in a school speaking about an industries, and we are showing pollution result, not by ourselves, but the controllers. And the girl said, I don't trust it. Okay, why? Because you're an industries. Okay, we are an industry. But someone fortunately control us. No, I don't trust. Okay, I asked, but if the controller have said that we are pollutant, okay, so I trust to them. If you want that what you think is the reality and what the other one thinks is not, it's difficult to communicate, of course. But in this way, you don't solve the problem. So the question is, you want to be right or you want to solve the problem, the environmental problem? The big question is this one, in my opinion.
And I will touch upon the COP upcoming, because I think I would like to know your opinion about it. But before that, so one of the main points when you study media is that there is a watchdog. It's always important that there's someone watching the news that is spread out because it has such a big effect. So do you think that having a watchdog when it comes to communicating sustainability, but not just against greenwashing, that's just fake news, we know that, but beyond that, which is the way which we're saying true things, do you think a watchdog could be useful in this sense, or there's also influence in that?
Absolutely. And the question is the same as before. We need watchdogs, but we need watchdogs that are able to understand the subject. I mean, when we are speaking about limits, okay, we are used to think limits as a speed limits, okay? So when I reach the speed limits, it means that the policeman stops me and give me a fee, okay, to pay. Industry sometimes has limits, but they produce the product they need to produce 10 times, 100 times less the level of the emission. So it's a good thing, but if they aren't able to explain, newspapers as a title like they are near the limits. And people say, oh, near the limits, it means that I feel the cancer. It's not true, but if you don't know what we are talking about, it's impossible to express. So industries are developing meetings with journalists in which they explain what does it mean to be an industry and blah, blah, blah. And journalists say, okay, but show me why environmentalists said this one okay, meeting with the environmentalists, meeting with the journalists, meeting with the politician, not only to, how can I say, make a lot of money. Today, if you want to have a future, you have to face that BlackRock, the biggest stock market, okay, today, recently said, we invest $0 in industries that are not clean technology approaching. Problem solved. You have no more money. So why someone so big? Because they follow the mainstream. We want to face the environmental problem. So we need a watchdog. But watchdog is what it means, watchdog. So he can recognize the
inequalities, we can say, maybe the difference, yes, indeed.
And again, we need to communicate in the right way.
So maybe this comes up with another question that I have, which is, do you think we're going fast enough? Because one question also with the upcoming COP26 is that, so professionals, policymakers have said that COP26 is the moment that we will have to make a decision. Negotiators and governments will have to make a decision, with the possibility that if good decisions, like for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which is a big debate about the carbon concern as well, that we will touch upon this week as well. And we have a series that came out, so maybe that's a chance to tell our audience. But do you think we're going fast enough? And as well, what are your expectations to the COP26? Not only negotiations, but the way the results are expressed.
Well, in the few weeks, next weeks, I will be one of the speakers in EGU. That is the European Geographical Approach to Environment, with a group of colleagues, ocean schools in Cannes-sur-Mer University. And we will speak about this question. So, okay, which one is the action we can do? Which one is the approach we can use? Because everything is very nice, very good, but we have to introduce a new way to approach the problem. Okay, I mean, we need to introduce the concept of the systemic retard. When we are speaking to the people today, we are speaking, okay, the future is the hydrogen, or the solution to the COVID is the vaccine. If you don't explain to people what does it mean systemic retard, you fail the communication. It's really simple. Environment as the COVID. February 2020, declaration of pandemic situation. So developing the vaccine. Usually we need 9 years to develop a new vaccine. We develop a new vaccine, several one, in only 1 year. So we need few months to develop the vaccine. Then month to try to find if the right one. Then the approval of EMA. Then starting the production. Then a number of production enough to vaccine the people, and then inoculate the vaccine. This one is the systemic retard. I know the problem in February, but I need a year and a half to start the problem, to solve the problem. It's the same if you are used to say people, oh, we have an environmental problem. Okay, and now which one is the goal? Okay, how many times we need to reach the goal? Why we need so a long time. It's not easy, but in my idea is the real point. Speak to the people, to the common people. I am a common people. I am a graduate in philosophy. I'm not a scientist. So I need clear and simple information. Okay? If you speak to me as in a clear word, explaining the whole picture, I start to believe. I start to trust. I don't believe that it's right to say, oh, hydrogen is the solution. Sea level is the problem. Stock market is decreasing or increasing. Give me a comparison. Give me the whole picture. In this way, I can do my best.
What about those who say that we are oversimplifying the conversation?
It's not a problem. The simplification is not misleading. Simplification is the best way to communicate to the people who has the knowledge. If someone is able to play guitar and he can explain you how to start to play guitar. If someone is a real scientist, is able to simplify the process as a metaphor, using metaphor, and you can understand. Simplification, it doesn't mean, how can I say, hiding the reality.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask, so what about, because you mentioned social media as a new form of good communication, but one of the interviews we'll have this week is exactly on social media, because the criticism there has to do with it not being either slacktivism, so the fact that we feel like we are taking part in the conversation, but the truth is we just shared a post, so it's a bit of not real. And then the other criticism was that it's too brief, it's too direct, and people don't have enough attention span to actually be interested. How can we do that better instead?
I propose a simple, in my opinion, a simple solution. When you receive a short message or information or a new picture on Instagram and so on, introduce a lack of time to the response. You can't respond immediately. You have to wait half an hour.
To like comment the picture, you mean?
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Yeah. Because
if you have time, you react if you are really interested in. It's not a simple reaction. So, I have to wait half an hour. I'm doing something else and I don't care. No, I'm really interested to dig the question. I'm waiting half an hour. I take a book, looking to new information. I made a phone call to a friend. Have you listened? And so my reaction is a part of the digestion of the information.
And how can we include those who don't have patience and who are not interested? If there's an answer to this, because it's a big universal question that I understand. But
what scared me about the use of the social media is that people using social media don't know that what you are saying or writing or showing by a picture stay on the net forever. And sometimes our reaction, I told you before, we are human. The instinct is our best friend, but it could be our worst friend. And so our reaction with "I like it" or using dirty words against a football teams stay forever on the net. It's something that is a patch on my body, and people don't know, don't think about this. So when you have to write something with a fountain pen, you need paper, you need ink, you need time, you need light, you need to think and then act and translate your thinking in. Using the social network, you don't. So they are very useful, very, very useful. But as a gun, as a car, you need a document to are able to to drive or to use a gun. We pay a lot of people for using a gun. Policemen, they are looking for our safety, but they are trained too. We are not.
So you would say this is sort of a digital citizenship. So the idea that you should be responsible for your own actions online. Indeed.
Maybe introducing a lack of time that is only a technological intervention. It doesn't need politician, doesn't need nothing. It's a simple accord. Instagram, Facebook, and the other one. Lack of response, half an hour. It's impossible to say, I like it when you receive the message.
I would be interested to seeing this applied for like 2 days and see what happens to the social media world. I would definitely be interested to see that. So I think we're reaching towards the end, and maybe I can ask you one last question, and so again, for the listeners, if you want to add your questions in the comment section, I'll be sharing them. So actually there is one. John Sewell. So John, hi John. So John's going to be with us at the end of this week. And he agrees that simplicity is the key to communicate complexity. And so maybe this goes to my last question, which would be, how would you like to see improvements in communicating sustainability? If any, of course, if any.
I use the same metaphor that I use in my safety lessons. The difference between the bad guy and the superhero is
their life experience, the way they sort of.
Superhero save lives.
Yeah.
The superhero doesn't pay attention to money. They act only for saving lives. So when you are a safety member in a company, you are a superhero. It's the same for the environment. If you are acting for the future of this planet, you are not a common people. You are a superhero because you are thinking and acting for saving lives in the next year. People you don't know. It's not important for a superhero because you are a superhero. And if you change the approach to the environment, not something that is, I'm guilty, oh, it's a pain, oh, it's terrible, I'm scared for the future. No, I'm a superhero of the environment because I like to act as a superhero. You change the point.
And it's something you mentioned in your chapter. You write about empathy, which is something extremely crucial in understanding why we're doing this. It doesn't just come with a more very mechanical, there's an issue, we resolve it. There's sort of many points around, which is something that sort of I like a lot about communicating sustainability, because it comes with empathy. It comes with realizing where you come from, how you think, but how the other person thinks of what you say. So I think it's very crucial. So do you have any final words you would like to tell our listeners?
Yes, if you want to change the world, be a little more egoistic. Because if you like to live at the best, you need the best friends, the best environment, the best of all. And to make the best of all, you have to start with the first step, to be the first who act, giving to the other something that's yours, because absolutely people start to like you more and they are more involved with you and able to help you when you are in difficulty, because you act at the beginning as a good egoistic people, because we like to live better. It's not a duty, it's a pleasure. It's
Yes, it is.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. It was then our pleasure to have you with us today, Riccardo. Thank you very much. I think I will share this quote with you, especially with our listeners. It was mentioned in a previous episode about how sharing what we do for the environment collectively on social media helps find more people who will be willing to add. So thank you very much. Thank you to our listeners. So this series of interviews is actually part of the Italian Ministry for the Environment's initiative, Agenda All for Climate, in hope that being on their agenda, we can share what we did today. We'll be meeting tomorrow with Mateus and talk about circular economy. So I look forward to having you, our listeners, again. Thank you, Riccardo. And yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aziz.
Bye.
Thank you, the follower. Thank you so much. Bye.